Hello and welcome to Alpha Anywhere Q&A. My name is Scott Allen and I'm here today with Dion McCormick. Dave and Sarah are out this week and we'll see them in weeks future. But today, yes. But today Dion is here to share some cool stuff about containers and aligning and other just container tricks. We'll just call it that, container tricks. Before I get started, I'll remind everybody, please, after this webinar is done, it will be uploaded within a week or two to the YouTube channel. Alpha-Software is our YouTube channel, so at Alpha-Software. And so you can watch this webinar then in a couple of weeks. You will also be able to watch all of the past webinars as well as lots of other video content that we have available. So please check out, subscribe, attend regularly our YouTube channel. But beyond that, Dion, are you there?
I am here. Can you guys hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine. Let me make you the presenter. Of course, I have to figure out where that is. Dupe and make presenter. Yes, and
there we go.
I have to unpause my screen because I was in pause. So
it's trying to make me the presenter. There we go. Okay, you should see my homepage there. How everybody?
Cool. See a handsome
Dynamite
there standing.
Thank you. Hey, so again, we're missing our fine feathered friends, but they're taking some well-deserved time off after a very busy last quarter, including the absolutely amazing DevCon. Putting that together is just always an amazing event. I also hope everybody's doing well and you're starting to gear up. We got Christmas just a little way away. Little holiday time. I know everybody's probably scrambling to get their last minute work done, but also shopping and other things. So we really do appreciate you joining us here. And again, we're here for you. So first and foremost, if you have questions, please go to your GoToWebinar control panel and put in your questions there. It can be on the topic we're talking about today, or we can obviously also answer other things, or attempt to answer other things, and we'll do our best to try and answer all of your questions. We really enjoy you coming here and being part of this. So today is, I've been working a lot with a couple different projects, and really one of the interesting things is the layout issues that come with projects, specifically how things are laid out on the screen. So I want to kind of go through and do a kind of a recap of the primary methods you can use to lay things out on the screen. We'll talk about the pros, the cons, when they've been used, where you might be able to use it, which is really fun, and those pieces here. And again, somewhat of a recap, but what I think you'll find out is that there's some newer stuff which you may not have explored that are built into it, which will make your life a lot easier and also allow you to be more flexible in terms of your different deployment options that are out there. So we're gonna go through that today. Quick talk about panel cards, but really focus on two other areas, which is the freeform layout and the containers. Those are the key pieces from there, and we'll go through each of those methodologies. Sort of like it's from the top levels, panel card structuring, but then from there, there's the individual field layouts that you can do from there. So what we're gonna do is dive in and actually just show how we use these different methods. We're not really gonna do a lot of slides because we don't wanna bore you to death, but we'll do that from that. So I'm gonna jump into there. I'm gonna go ahead and create a new UX because all this happens within the UX. By the way, you can always do stuff in an A5W page and then insert tags. I mean, that's all doable, but obviously there's a number of different ways to do it. So in terms of laying things out on the screen, there are, real quick, before I go into that, there are some things such as the Viewbox, and I'm not really going to cover that today. We've covered that before, but that is also essentially a layout tool because you can create a Viewbox and then within that Viewbox have data and then present it with HTML, CSS, and layouts. So that's definitely one very strong way. Plus, obviously, the Viewbox has an enormous amount of other features in terms of programmability and interactivity, et cetera. We kind of covered that last week. At the later part of it, so that's a really powerful. So we're not really going to cover that. This is more covering your basic plain vanilla kind of layout capabilities from there. So first thing I'm going to do is just go ahead and add a couple text boxes. I'm going to actually, this is for people who are new, this is a single control, but we can actually create multiple controls at once. And you can go back and forth whenever you want to between the two. So I'm going to go text box 1 and text box 2. That way I do 2 of them one time, saves me a little time. I can then say, do I want a label position, where it should be, and some other pieces. There's some other neat little features down here that are able to show the existing fields. I don't have any on there, but it'll help you in terms of once your UXs get a little more complicated, there are tools that help you quickly add new controls to your page without having a problem. So I do my work in preview, and we see that it's laid out a couple fields for me. And traditionally, it's a vertical orientation. And you'll see it has my text box and then the actual control itself, the label and pieces there. So what I want to do is actually, to make this a little more effective, I'm going to go to the properties, and I'm going to use a different style. I'm going to go ahead and use alpha blue gray. Let's use that one today. And I'm also going to use compact because I want to have more fields on here because that will make more sense. So you can see now I have, a little nicer, tighter representation, but it's got all those pieces there. Now, to make this more interesting, I want to go ahead and just take these two, and I'm going to duplicate these selected controls. So when you start building things, often one thing I highly recommend is when you build more complex is you set up and get your first control kind of set up exactly how you want it structured, and then you can just duplicate it or copy and paste it to move things along much quicker. I just find that's a fast and effective way versus having to create a bunch of controls and then go back and re-edit all of them and update their styles and everything else. Because if I go like this and say, okay, let's take these two, I'm going to duplicate these by either selecting this medium item or hitting Control D, and it's going to tell me, oh, I'm going to automatically rename those. I can do that again. Let's duplicate that again. It's smart enough to make sure everything has unique naming. And now, and I'll go layout _ UX. Now I have more, so something more interesting that's doable from there. So as you can see, I have, basically a vertical representation. After each one of these is a line break that on, think of it like on HTML, a BR break that puts behind there. And you'll notice though, it did remember the same label name, so I might need to fix that later on kind of scenario. But from a field naming convention, it's smart enough to make sure that each of these are unique field names so it doesn't break and not allow you to use the UX from there. So one way, a very old school way that's been around for a while, but still is very handy, is something called the Freeform Control. So I can either look up here, Freeform, there's the Freeform Layout control, or I can actually go down to containers and it's under the container section because essentially you think of it as a container for a set of controls. So I'm going to put that on there and I'm going to leave that there. So now I have a Freeform container and I'm going to go ahead and do a working preview. And so you'll see nothing shows up yet because these are going to get displayed, but down here you'll notice that that Freeform control is not showing anything. And the reason why is it's really just a container. It creates some HTML that will hold other fields if you want them. So I use this a lot for quick and dirty kind of layout to make things look a little better. So actually, to make this a little more interesting, I'm going to go ahead and put some default values in here, ABC. So we got some data in them. So when they show up, G, GEE, and I'll just do some more so it's a little more interesting. BBB, CC, and last, we'll get these in there. And then I just want to have a little data so when they represent, you'll be able to see that. KKK. Okay, no, that's probably not a good one. MMM. Okay, so save that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go into my Freeform container here. And you'll notice that, it is nice because it acts like the other controls. It has things like show hide. It has client-side properties. You can add actual behaviors to it. So it's a very flexible there. But you'll notice when I click on it, there's a very top level here called Freeform Layout. So I'm going to select that, and you'll notice that it brings up a Freeform Layout editor. But you'll notice, hey, wait, there are no placeholders and information in there. And the reason why is when you use a Freeform editor, it will only show things in here when you have hidden the control. Because the idea is, here is your control. Instead of having the system display and render it, I actually want to display and render that inside of here. But I don't want to show it here and here at the same time. So therefore, I'm going to go up to text box 1 and I'm going to click the hide button. This will hide that control, so it won't be displayed on the screen. And in fact, if we do a quick working preview, you'll notice that it's now disappeared. That first one is gone because I've hidden that control, and it's still. Now, if you looked at the HTML, it's still in there because it's rendered on the client side, but it's not showing up there. So I'm going to do the same thing for text box number 2 and select that. There's a little lagginess, but that will go. Okay. So now that I've hidden those, I'm going to go back to my Freeform container, and I'm going to go into here, and I'm going to click on here, and you'll notice, now that I've hidden some of my controls, they're showing up here. And so this is, think of this as an HTML area, where basically if I just go like this, I'm just going to go ahead and by double clicking on them, insert them here. And so we'll go in here, text box 1, I'll go right here and put text box 2. So that basically says, hey, create a little layout with these controls. And actually I want 2 is what I want. So let's go ahead and just do a quick look and see what that looks like. And you'll see, look, it's taking these controls that are hidden and rendering them next to each other. And why is that nice? Well, now I can go in here. And by the way, a shortcut is you can either click here on Freeform Layout, or you can just double click and it'll open this up here and show you there. So I can do things, I can start using this as, I can start putting in HTML. So for instance, I can put any HTML in there. So let's go try this. I'm going to put a header line. I think it's HR, that's a rule. And I'm going to say some cool stuff. And then I'm going to put a break. Notice that it uses HTML. So I can actually, to make this more readable, I can go like this. But if I did that without the HTML, it just would ignore those spaces. It just makes it easier to look at this. So let's go ahead and actually put this header, or this rule is here. Okay. So now when I go in here, I can see now that, it put in my little static text. It put a rule under there, and then it put each field after each other. And the rule created this space right here. It's just built into it. There's like a space below it, so it doesn't ammo. So you can see already I took this boring kind of vertical layout, and now I can start modifying it. Now you'll notice something very interesting. Where's my text box 1? If I go over to text box 1, you're going to see that I actually, and I'm going down here, I've said, here's the label, and here's the position of that label. So I've actually said, hey, I want to see it. But when you're working with the Freeform control, what it does is it strips any labeling. So you're going to have to go in here and just do your own labeling, which often, to be honest, works a little better depending on your structure, because sometimes it's like awkward how Alpha does the labels. You have to tweak it a lot, but I can go right there. So I can go ahead and put that in there. And what's nice too is then you can apply your own CSS and everything else to that. So you can see now I've got my hard-coded little text here. I've got my control, and I'm already seeing a very tight knit. And so one thing this does really nicely is that it allows you to create very dense representations if you have a more complex screen, versus laying these things out, because sometimes Alpha will put natural spaces around it, which is fine for just basically how it works. So a couple other things about that before I move on is too, you can use any CSS in here. You can use tables. You can use any HTML, CSS content within this. So you can do something kind of cool. So you can go in here and I don't want to get too deep on it. In fact, what's great is we have our CSS expert with us today from that standpoint, but you can go to the properties here, go to the CSS. You can either bring in an external, or you can, that's SVG. You can bring in some linked CSS. Let's say you find some cool CSS on the internet. You can bring that over here, but you can also create your own local CSS. Where's local CSS? There it is. You can actually go in here and you can define your own CSS with our coder. And then once you have that in here, like let's go ahead and just do something very simple, test. And then I can say, you know, it's font family this. Let's pick one. Wait, just grab one of them. Oh, that was kind of cool. What was that? I don't want, okay, that one. And then font size, etc. It'll generate the code for you. Oh, did it not select that? Bear with me. I don't want to waste your time. Okay. Okay, and then maybe the size, you know, we'll make that bold, etc. You can create your own stuff, and it creates the code for you here, the selector here. Once you've created your CSS or linked it in there, you can go in. I'm not going to save this, but I'm going to go back into my control, and in here, you could actually go in here and, you know, put a span saying, you know, class equals, etc. So what's nice about that is you can actually hire really good CSS people and allow them to create some cool CSS for you. And then once that CSS is created, you can just link it in and then apply it, and then your stuff will look a lot nicer versus kind of the plain vanilla. Also, just to let you know, there's a couple things you can do here. I can save this as a template. So if I like this layout and I tend to use it a lot, let's say it's like the address layout or it's another kind of layout, I can just quickly say, you know, I'm going to save this. I'm going to call it address. And this is for address info. Okay. I'll click OK. And then that template is now available for me if I want to create this with a template so I can restore that. Very cool. Now, the other is that we have a bunch of sample templates. This is where it gets really fun and interesting. So let me go ahead and do this. I'm going to go ahead and keep this one as OK. I'm going to now take these two items here. I'm going to take that one. I'm going to hide it. Oh, that's hidden. I'm sorry. Let's go to the 3 and hide it. And then let's go to text box 4 and hide that. Okay. I'm going to go down here. I'm going to create a new freeform layout. Okay. I'm going to go into it. You'll notice my new things that I've hidden are right there. But what I can do is go in here and insert a template. So these are some nice looking templates that are already pre-created. They have like images and other things like that. So let's do some, and you can see here's my template that I just created. So I could just click here and say yes, and it immediately brings in that template with whatever was there before. And then I could just say, oh, let's make this, you know, text box 3 and 4. Mine's ugly, so we won't use that. So let's use something that looks a little prettier. So I'm going to go down here. Let's try this one. This is kind of interesting. Oh, and it's got the buttons, so it's cool. So I can put that in there. Now, don't worry. It looks very complicated, but CSS, for whatever reason, tends to do that a lot. So you'll see in here that it's got all this style information that's built into that template. Again, some of these items this style information is called inline style. This can actually be taken out of here and put into CSS, either a linked file or into the local definitions. But basically this defines when you sit there and say, okay, which do I want, how to do it. But the most important thing I want to show you is that here's all the style stuff, and then here is the actual content. So now I can go in and say, instead of card heading, I want it to put text box 3 data. And then instead of that long text, I want what would ever be displayed, and I think I hit there, is text box 4. And again, this is just, you know, basically going to take whatever data is in there. Like let's say you load it from a database, and it's going to then merge that data with here, and good to go there. So let me go ahead and save that. Off to the races. So now you'll see, oh, check it out. I've got my background image. I've got my there. Now, what's interesting is notice this. I'm not running this in live preview. I think I have to do a full preview to get all the styling information to show, and working preview is somewhat limited. So let's see what happens here. Yeah, there's some things are up on that, so I'm not going to spend too there. But you'll notice that these things right here are being rendered on this as text boxes. So you can go back to these and you say, you know what? Let's not render that as a text box, but let's render that as a label. And let's render this as a label, because it's going to interpret and say, oh, you want a text box where that position is on there. So now by doing a label, it will bring this up and you'll see, oh, now notice that it's highlighting this with a font format. So it took that text and showed it here. And instead of rendering a text box, which overrides some of the formatting, it does there. So, you know, so this may be a little more interesting when I say something like Super Kitty, and then go here. Maybe this is a cat database or something like that. This breed is dangerous and should not be around children. Okay, and let's go ahead and do a working preview, and it'll maybe look a little bit better. So you can see now, here you go. It's got this nice little label, and then the information I put right there overlaid on this image. These buttons, when it's actually live, will come up from the bottom. So they're not displaying rendering here in working preview, but we'll do that. So remember, when you're merging this data in, it's going to take whatever control format you're in and use that within the interpreted. So in my first case, when I did here, that was perfectly okay because I wanted to just create a data entry little panel to do it. But if you want to make it a little bit more display text like the other one, then what I did is I turned these into text box or labels. And then in here, I reference those labels in the actual text down here. And instead of creating a text box, even though the naming is bad, by the way, so sorry about that, should have been a little better on that, does it from there. So this is called the freeform. It's an easy, simple way to put stuff in there. Just remember, it will render whatever type of control you have here. And also these controls need to be hidden for you to actually insert them and merge them into the freeform. But it's my go-to when I want to just kind of clean up the interface, make it look a little nicer, often for things like address fields and stuff where you have a group of data you want to place together. And so that's very, very handy from that standpoint there. Now that's called freeform, but there's other ways to organize this. So what I'm going to do real quick is let's go ahead and close this. And I'll go through these fairly quickly. I'm going to duplicate this thing and I'll say, we'll go into container, and these will go a little faster just to show you the principle behind it. Okay, so I'll go to layout container. And now I'm going to get rid of these freeforms. Okay, and I want to do a couple things. I'm going to take this, unhide those. In fact, what I can do, which is kind of cool, I'm going to make that unhidden, and then I'm going to copy that to here. By the way, I'm using the little drop. It allows me to select and do that. So now it takes that property, in this case hide, and makes these things the same. So it saves you a little time there. So let's take these four here. I'm going to go ahead and put in a container. I'm going to put a container around it. Now I have a whole bunch of different types of them. I'll come to each one in a few moments, are the ones that are important for layout. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put in a container here. I'm going to say none. I'm asking it to do an insert and opening. Since I've selected this field, it'll do that. And now I've got these containers. Now containers are, like freeform, invisible controls, meaning in and of themselves, they don't display anything. They just control the layout. And they're really equivalent to divs in the HTML world. So I can go to working preview and you'll see now, not a whole lot of difference. It was like what is forward, but I've turned these so you can see those. So what's going on is there's an invisible container here and one here. Now, if I want to use this as a layout tool, you'll notice that there's a little ampersand, which is the page break. I'm going to remove that. So now, instead of going to this point and putting a page break, it's going to put these side by side. So this is your go-to if you just want to lay things out into kind of columnar structures. This is that first container. Here's the second container here. So it's a quick and dirty way to lay out your different fields into different columns. Always useful and way to go. It's again controlled by, it goes to this point. You'll notice that there are carriage returns or breaks go here so that each of these are on a separate field. Then it gets here and says, oh, I'm not going to put in a break. So therefore, I'm going to start laying these out next to me. And that's how you can do it from there. It's similar to panel cards, kind of how panel cards, you have a layout area and then you put them side by side from that scenario. Now, more importantly, this is your first just simple layout, but containers have different types. So I inserted this as a plain one, but you'll notice here we have something called subtype. So I'm going to click on there and it brings up all of those ones you saw before. I'm not going to go through all of these. I'm just going to go through a few of the key ones that are involved with page layout, but they're very, very powerful. And there's lots of different ones that are available. So first, let's just do the alignment container. Okay, so you'll notice a couple things. One is that it changed the color of this container. And it also went in and added some other things I can select from here. But the idea behind a alignment container is that it's a handy tool to lay things out into a container area. So to make this interesting, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hard code this container to be 200 pixels high width and 200 pixels wide. Actually, 200 pixels. Okay. So I haven't made any adjustments, but I'm going to go ahead and see what this looks like by just putting it in there. So you can see I'm not seeing much different from there. Let's actually make this container 400 pixels by, because it's going to automatically try and lay out. It's not going to clip things. It's going to lay out all the pieces that are in there. It's going to extend the container to wrap all those pieces there. Okay, so you'll notice that you don't see it, but it's put some extra space around here because I said, oh, make sure the width of this container is 400 pixels there. So even if you don't use alignment and stuff, containers are good because you can say, okay, I want 2 columns. Column 1 will be 300 px, the other one will be 200 px. I want them side by side. Those kind of things can be done very quickly just using the container and then adjusting that. But now what I want to do, you'll notice up here it says container alignment and container vertical. So let's go ahead and make this right aligned for container alignment. So we go to container alignment, open up working preview, and you'll notice now the container's still here, but it's taken the contents and moved it over to the right. So you can see, oh yeah, kind of nice way to do that. I mean, there's other better ways, but this just allows you to immediately do that. So let's just adjust that. Let's make it center, but you'll also notice we have container vertical alignment. I'm going to also say middle. So now what it's going to do is that when I do a working preview, it's going to take that content and it's going to center in this 400 by 400. And so now this data, no matter what, will be centered in the middle of it. So that's it's a very kind of nice tool to have that allows you to do those pieces and put those in there, because in that case, it's going to take care of aligning it properly on the screen for you. You'll notice this container still is just aligning things in the top left. That's the default behavior. Go from there. So that's what you would use an alignment container as a quick and dirty way to lay things out. So you give it a little white space, you organize it on the screen so it's more visually appealing, and it's pretty easy. And it's really straightforward. You just change the type to container, and then you can say center and middle. Now there's another alignment one here called Flex Layout. I'm not going to spend much time on it. In fact, let's go here, Flex, actually here, and then go here, Flex. Flex Layout is more for mobile, and I haven't used it a whole lot there, but what it does, and you can even see by the graphics, it lines things up, and it was really kind of meant for the mobile layout world. To a large degree, some of these things have kind of been taken over by control bars and other better techniques there, but I do want you to know that it's there. And basically all this does, it dynamically size controls when the orientation of the device changes or when the window size is changing. So the idea is that you can see, okay, right now you have panel text here, it's going to stretch this text box so that it fills this whole area, depending on like a portrait versus a landscape and there. So it can help from a layout standpoint. Again, it was really oriented towards the mobile world, but it is nice to have that from that standpoint. So you can go in and set it, and it's got different rules for doing it, and it will do those. And there's a nice video right here. And in fact, let me copy this and just put this. Oh, bad. Don't copy that. Copy here. And that's what I got to copy. And I'll put that in the chat if you're interested in looking a little bit more about that. But Flex, again, oriented for mobile, so I don't use it a whole lot, but it's available from that standpoint there. So that's Flex there. So actually a more interesting one that's more new from this is called the CSS Grid. And I really like the CSS Grid. Again, you'll see I changed this to CSS Grid. I'm leaving the container height and width. You'll notice I have controls inside that container, and it's changed the color. And the color's handy, especially when you start having a lot more different controls and containers on your screen. It allows you to make sure, kind of visually know how these things are working. So I'm letting that save. So I'm going to go in there. So if I go into working preview now, you'll see that it's kind of thrown some stuff around here. So I have to do some work to get it going from that standpoint. So how does it work? So I go into my container, I click on it here, but over here on the right, you're going to notice it says CSS Grid Container Layout. So let's open that up, and aha, voila. You'll see I have my fields inside the container. These do not have to be hidden. I mean, that's only when you're using that the other freeform layout on this. But let's say I want to put here text box 1. So I clicked on this cell, put it here. Let's say I want to put text box 2 over here. And let's put text box 3 over here and text box 4 over here. So this gives you a grid methodology for laying out your screen, which often can be very, very handy when you have a lot of controls versus putting in tables and a whole bunch of other stuff. This allows you to do it. A couple other things about this, and we'll cover these in a moment. You can control widths and sizing and stuff like that. So let's just see what this looks like. So now that I've put those in those positions, it's going to build underneath there a grid. And why is it not showing that? Do I have to do it in line preview? Should be showing those things. Nope. I must be doing something wrong here. Okay. Grid layout. I've got text box 1, 2. So let's do this. Let's put this down on the next row and see what it looks like here. Wow, it's not laying out that way. So I make sure my sizing is correct. Okay, so we have 3 rows, 4 columns. There's a gap. You'll see there's a little gap between them. Controls. Okay. So that's all been done there. Oh, okay. Well, let's go ahead and do this. Let's define the column sizes of 100 px. And let's define the row sizes as 100 px. Okay. And I apologize. I must be doing something a little different. Okay. Yeah, my layout's not working properly. Containers 400 pixels. Well, I might have to kind of punt a little bit, come back to it, but I just wanted to show you. Oh, this goes there. Text box 1. Okay, position stretch. Yeah. So I'm not going to belabor it. I apologize. My demo here is not doing it, but it's a very handy tool because it allows you to create this, what's called a grid. Do I need to improve anything? Nope, there's nothing there. That allows you to basically lay things out in a grid-like fashion, which is often much easier than setting up containers and trying to lay them out in a certain order, et cetera. That gets very time consuming. This can be much faster just to build these pieces. And in here, you can, put the different controls that are within the container here into those locations, and then it will do the layout pieces from there. So I'm not sure why that's doing there. I won't belabor it from that standpoint. Now, that is really nice when you're doing kind of larger sets of controls, but there's another one that's actually really cool. It has a sort of detriment to it, but overall, it's very powerful. So I'm going to go back up here to subtype, and then I'm going to go to the absolute layouts. Let me find that real quick. There we are. Absolute layout. So absolute layout was introduced a while back, and it was introduced for a very specific reason. And I'll explain that in a few moments. But again, the concept is I've got my container here. I've got my controls here. So have that all ready to go. I'm going to go to my absolute container, same concept of width and height, but you'll notice there's something down here called absolute positions for controls. So I go ahead and click on that, and it opens up an editor. And the editor is basically showing the height and width of the area, and then my controls that are within the container here. And now what I can do is I can actually click on this, go over here and click and drag, and put these at very exact pixel perfect spots. So it takes care of, and you notice it's got like things like where it matches things up. It actually can do alignments and other pieces there. Here's another one. I'm going to go there, add that. Then I can make this wider. I can actually go ahead and put this one in here. So let's just go ahead and look at what that is. So now I'm going to save that, and it depends on the control, but when I do the working preview now, you're going to see it laid these things out together in this orientation. You say, oh, you know what? I want this below there. You just go into this position, and we're going to move this down here. And then I click OK. And then I do a working preview. And you'll see now it's relayed this out with that information below it. And this is pixel perfect. So every time you render this, it's always going to look, and it is not responsive. Now, that's the number one thing you have to take into account, is that this basically forces the location of these controls in this area here. And if I change orientation, if I'm on a different screen size, etc., it's always going to force that, which is a good thing. But the bad thing is that if you have like a mobile device, it won't do all the nice things that that other, basically will relay it out on the screen. Responsive will relay it out. So that's the one thing to realize, that it works great. You can do absolute layout of where things need to go, but realize it's not going to render as well like on mobile devices unless you have the screen size, because it's not going to be responsive of saying, oh, the screen's not wide enough, I'm going to take this field and put it over here for you, so at least it shows correctly. So, but that's usually not a bad thing, because when you launch this screen, you can actually say, am I on a mobile or a desktop, and automatically direct to the right UX that has that layout. So a little more work for you, but it still will work very, very easily from there. Now, there's a couple other things that are nice about this. So first, you'll notice I have these two controls that are kind of all over the place. I'm going to click on the first one and then click on the second one, and I'm going to click this Edit Selected. So this allows you to do a whole bunch of things very easily. So for instance, I can say match the size by first selected, meaning I selected text box 1 and then text box 2, so I'm going to say first selected. So now it's made the sizes of these exactly the same vertically and there. So if you need to do quick and dirty, like, okay, I'm gonna select this one, I want that one, I want it to be exact size, boom, you'll notice now text box 3 has that. Or let's say you go, oh, you know what? Oops, that wasn't good. I can actually, by the way, I go, oh, I screwed that up. I can click on this one and I can make the top and the width. Let's make the height, 80. So you can literally type in how big this box should be for this control in here. And so you can use a combination of layout here, but I can go here, and I can select those three by shift clicking. And I can say, for instance, align the left, align the right. Or let's say I want these two, let's go right here. Let's say I want those. I'll click this one, and say, and you'll notice it does it off of the first one. So let's align the top, the first one that I select. And you can do something also kind of cool. So you can say, oh, oops, there's not much of an undo. So that's the only other thing I'm not, you got to be a little careful when you start clicking around, but just go back to here. But I can take this one, and this one. I can select them, and I can also do stuff like distribute horizontally, and then align the top, and it will put the same space between each one so that it looks pleasing to the eye from that standpoint. And I can also select multiple and then drag that group around as a group and put those pieces. If I don't want one on there, I can just delete it. I can change the width of this container by just clicking on this and dragging it, say that's all I want it to be. And you can also, it's got a grid here, so you can do grid and you can snap to grid. So you can really see this thing is going to snap exactly where you want it to be. So from a layout, it's like a desktop layout tool for page layout. Pretty nice to do from that standpoint there. Now, if you like this, again, you can export and import those settings. So if you're redoing this kind of style over time. The other thing that's nice is got a built-in help here that talks about how to place the control, how to remove it, changing the save, etc. from one thing there. So that is your absolute layout. Now, one other thing that it can do, which is really cool, and which is where this came from, is you can add a background image. And you can add a background image on this, and you can pick a built-in image, a external one. You can actually include it in here. So hold on a second. Bear with me. I will find a good image here. I think let's say I should have done this beforehand. Simple. Okay. Hold on a second. We'll be back. Okay. I'm just going to save an image into my where's my project here? Almost done.
Someone was asking, is this the thing where you can upload a PDF and drag your fields over the PDF?
Yeah, you can upload an image, and that's what I was going to show here real quick. So bear with me. There we go. Okay. I'm almost there. I just have to download this. Let's see, layout. Oh, well, I'm going to save it to the desktop. Actually, I got to find a better one. Bear with me.
Would you like the Jeopardy theme song or the Benny Hill?
There you go. That would be helpful. Yeah, for sure. Here's a good one.
In circles.
Okay. Good. I found it. Okay, good. Okay. Go back here. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I downloaded an image. So I'm going to go to the desktop, and I just grab that image there. I'm going to copy that, and I want to put that into my project folder. So it's part of my project, because when you publish it, you want it to be there. So now I'm going to go back in here. I'm going to say, you know what? I want a background image. I'm going to use an image from the web project or style, and then I can select from the web project. There's my image. There's my little baby form. Not a really good example because it's so simple, but you could download a very nice looking form like an IRS form or something. Now, when you go in here, check this out. I can actually see my form here, and I can literally take and drag exactly where my controls should be on here. And what it will do is now, which is very cool, is when I do a working preview on the screen, it's going to render that image and put my real life controls on them. Now, for instance, in this, it's got this little blue bar under there. That's a factor of the style that I'm using from here. So you may want to change the style of your text box to a different style that doesn't have all that stuff on there. You may want to use a plain style so that when it renders it, it's just a very clean looking text box. But notice it rendered this text here as text and these controls, and I can actually edit that data, etc. And it's all on this form, and this could be a form. So that was what it was originally designed for, was the concept of people wanting to see they wanted to take a pre-made form and fill it out like you would, because they didn't want to have to try and recreate that form in the system. It would just be easier to take a scan of a form, upload it, overlay the containers. Now, again, you're limited because it's not responsive, so you just have to be aware of that. But for those kind of applications, you're usually using on a desktop or a tablet, so you have plenty of space for the form. Again, the form I picked was pretty boring, but it can be any kind of PNG. And again, it's image. It's so you can take a PDF. If you have a PDF, you can convert it, but you have to convert it to a PNG or JPEG because it's looking for some kind of image base, because it's going to render it as an image on the screen. And I've done that several. It's really handy, especially if you go into an account where they have existing forms and they want to get those, because people are so used to filling them out. But now what's cool about it is that you can add all of the different validations, lookups, etc., to these values to it, and just create an even more powerful form-based system in a very short period of time. So I'm going to cut it off here. I apologize about the CSS layout. That one is actually very nice. I'm not sure what I was doing wrong. It's been a little while since I've used it, but do explore it. It's really, really handy. Actually, let's go up here. Let's go here. Go to CSS. Let's see. I don't know. I'll see if I can try and find that. But I want to go ahead and open it up for questions on that. Yeah, I don't know.
Or we
For
got
you, style builder.
we've
Yeah.
got
Anyway, we'll go ahead and I'll just hush up and listen and see what we can do to help out.
All right, all right. So thank you, Dion. That was awesome. Lots of
Yeah.
cool tools to play with there for aligning and organizing your data. So let's see. We had one where the question was, can Viewboxes or HTML freeform layout be used for a mobile disconnected app by itself to make it very lightweight, or does it require a UX control at the top level? Would it require an onboard SQL database?
So two things. One is it absolutely can be used in mobile. It is in all of these things are inside of a UX. So you're going to deploy UX is like your master container scenario there. If you wanted to, you could use a list control to download and manage that data offline and be able to update it and synchronize it back. So you do not need to use a local SQL database if you so choose. One thing that's cool is now when you're building local, you can actually ask it to include a SQLite database. There's some really cool videos on how to do that from that standpoint there. But more importantly, though, all of these controls work whether they're on a mobile device or a desktop. It's just HTML being rendered in a web view. So the answer is absolutely. And you can use them to, lay things out nicely. They, certain things aren't responsive, but other things are. Like containers are responsive. They'll rearrange themselves. They'll say, oh, I don't have enough width on the screen, so I'm going to just put myself below so that it shows properly. Absolute container, not so much. It's going to force it because you've sort of hard coded the width and height, and it creates a little sort of canvas it writes things on. Not much there, but you can kind of play with it because again, in the UX, there are some really cool tools in here called the responsive theme layout settings. And in here, you can add rules that say basically that if a device has a width of this screen or this height or stuff like that, execute some JavaScript, which could say show this version or show this version, or like for instance on a list, show this layout, their lists. So don't shy away from it. There's some really cool things you can do to kind of handle on it. But again, they can be used both on desktop and mobile. As again, per the data thing, you can use a SQLite database, but you're going to need to actually wrap it and deploy it through to there. But if you want to, you can just use a list control. And in the list control, you can connect that list control to a backend database, but it's going to take and pull that data down, render it as local JSON, operate it there. So then you can use it in an offline manner and then just resync it from there. And there's no requirement that you have an app or anything else. You can literally open up a web page. And there are certain limitations to how much data you can bring, but it's pretty liberal this day. I mean, I think it's like 25 megs or something, pretty heavy in terms of what it can do to bring things down from that standpoint. So I hope that gave some guidance or information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. Yeah, we had a couple other ones here sort of related. This one's about containers. So card container and how it differs from the freeform container. Something along those lines.
Sure. Yeah, let me go ahead and add a container in here. Okay. Card container. Okay. By the way, if you have any questions on this, when you open up this container, you'll notice that there's a little button down here. Again, there used to be one or two, and then they just kept adding a whole bunch of new containers. It's pretty cool there. But if I go to a card, this displays the contents in the card. So let's go ahead and, so this was, by the way, this card was sort of like an early version of panel and panel cards and layouts. And so it somewhat has to do it has this ability. So let's just show a quick demonstration. It's kind of cool to do that from there. So let me go ahead and create a new UX. And I'm just going to do this super fast just so we can show it. And again, it may be nicer than putting together a whole bunch of panel layout stuff. So I'm going to go in here. I'm going to add a container. Let me actually, it's faster. I go down here. Container. So we're putting card navigator. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to put in another container, and I'm going to call that card, and I'm going to put in another card. Oops. There we go. I'm going to put in another card. If you've done anything with panel layouts, this is very similar to it. So let's go ahead and put in another container, and I'll put another card. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make this quick and add a some static text. Okay. And I'm going to duplicate that. Move that down in there. Okay. Okay. So it says this must have a height. So let's say it's 100 px.
I think you might want to change the text in text card 1 to text card 2.
Good idea. Okay. So you can see I've got test card 1 showing because there's a panel card there. And then I've got card 2 that's hidden. So I believe you have to put in navigation to move them from card to card, but this also allows you to have some very nice effects. But other things in here, for instance, you can put a card header, and then you can put a card footer. And let's put a card footer. So very much like panel cards. So let's go ahead and put a static text. So that's header. And then I will duplicate that. Make that footer. Okay. So this is really nice when you're creating card metaphors on screens. You don't have to put the navigator on. Yeah, so this card's a little small, so I'd have to do that, but you'll notice it's showing in the header and footer. It does the layout pieces there. In the card navigator, you can add your own styling, so you can create like nice rounded corners and things like that. And then I believe you can also add a button. So let's see, let's try this real quick. I'm just gonna add a button. It's probably gonna screw up my layout, but test. And I'm gonna go down here. I'm gonna make that a little taller so it doesn't clip off there. Then I'm gonna go into button test and I'm gonna add new action. Yep. So what I did is I said, I want to have the ability to move from one card to another. So and by the way, this is super lightweight. This stuff just renders instantly on the screen. So I'm gonna go to button test. I'm gonna go here to add new action. I'm gonna type the word card and you'll see card navigator actions. I can say navigate to card and navigate to card navigator 1. And then I want to go to card 2. And then I can have transitions. And then after a transition, I can actually trigger some JavaScript to do something. So it's pretty flexible. So now let's go look at this. Go into working preview. So I'll test that and you'll notice, oh, let's make this thing a little wider with 300. Okay. Do working preview. Excuse me. Okay. Test. And then there's my card number 2. Obviously, I need a way to navigate. That button doesn't have to be on the card itself. It could be outside the card. But you'll notice I can now use multiple pieces of information here on the same screen. So I can preserve my size and stuff. I don't have to lay everything out. So maybe it's like record number 1, number 2, or number 3 could be on each card, and then you can flip through them, do animations and other things like that. So thank you so much for whoever suggested talking about cards, because they're really nice from a presentation standpoint. You still have to lay them out. And so inside here, you can use another container. Here you could wrap that in a container, make it an absolute layout or alignment or other things, similar techniques. But then this is a wrapper that allows you to create a card metaphor for your system. So pretty cool capability. Very much like panel cards, but on a finer tuned control.
Yeah, so you're saying you could nest another container inside that container Are there any containers that you can think of that don't nest well with others?
Definitely the absolute layout, but
Mhm.
absolute layout's very powerful. I want to show you something I found out the other day is that, let's go ahead and do this real quick just so you can see what it lists. I'm going to go ahead and quick setup Genie. I'm going to get the data from, I want to just put a list on there. I don't want to use the quick setup. So let me do this real quick. It's kind of neat. Okay. So I'll go into my list control. I'm going to go here to static data, and I'm going to insert just some sample data, name and addresses. I'm going to go list layout, add these two things there. Okay, now that I've got my key there, I'm going to actually move that list control up into the absolute layout container. And I'm going to go into the container positioning. I'm going to make this a little bigger. And then I'm going to take this and I'm going to lay out that list right here underneath my form. I'm going to tighten this back up. And now, so I found, like, for instance, frames don't render well. There's certain things, but notice I've got my there, but this is on the absolute container. So you can go, oh, I don't like that there. I want to go into my absolute container and I'm going to move this over to here. And I'll show you an example of what happens here. So it puts it over here. You'll notice it didn't clip it because of the nature of it, but now my positioning. So it's pretty handy. I mean, you can do a lot of different things. I think the only area I found an issue with is that if I want to put like these two and I want to put a frame around it, which is a common tool. Let's just add frame. I want to test. Okay. And then I want to go into my layout. May have been radio buttons, but there's certain things. Let's try this real quick. Okay. Well, did work fine. Sorry. So there's certain controls that have problems. I think text box, radio buttons were a little difficult, but if you play with it, you'll understand how the different pieces, but it's really nice. You say, oh, I don't like the alignment on that. You just go right into it and say, I'm going to move this so it's right there. Boom. Working preview. And it will save you a lot of time because you won't spend all your time creating containers, trying to do layouts and stuff like that. Pretty handy there. You can create pretty nice looking, tight, sophisticated looking, even including images and the backgrounds and stuff, laying them out perfect, especially if you're trying to replicate some kind of form methodology. Can't be beat. Really, really handy there. But do realize it is not responsive. It is works, but it's not responsive from that standpoint.
Okay. We're running out of time, but I did want to get one more in here or two little ones that can just be answered.
Sure. We'll see what we can do.
There was one here where the person was mentioning that they had a WordPress website that they built in a builder, and they're wondering what makes more sense. Would it be to embed their alpha app into the website, or embed the website into the alpha app? It was like, are there advantages to one or the other?
I would, in my experience, you would basically embed the alpha site into the WordPress, because WordPress does a lot of its own stuff. There's a bunch of really nice plugins you can get to insert content into like a iframing basically, but it works really nicely from there. But I'd kind of approach it, depends on what you're trying to do, but definitely on WordPress. I've never had any experience pushing WordPress into inside of alpha. It's just such a monster application. I think you could by using iframes and stuff, but you'll probably be better off by just creating like UXs and A5W pages and embedding those in there. The only other thing you have to look at is the security elements of making sure that because you're probably going to be hosting them on separate domains possibly, or servers, because alpha runs on its piece, you have to just make sure that it's going to render okay in the person's browser, because you basically have WordPress and then you're inserting content from another site. It's just a security thing that goes on.
All right. Well, we are out of time for the day. Dion, I want to say
fun.
showing us all these cool things. It's been great. And if any of you have any other questions that have been yet unanswered or new questions throughout the week, please send them to guys@alphasoftware.com. And come out and check out our videos on our YouTube channel at alpha-software on YouTube. Dion, any last words or thoughts?
No, just thank you very much for joining us. We really enjoyed it.
All right, thanks all. See you next week.